Morning dear students, I am Sanju Hazria, Assistant Professor of English at Government College Ratangad. Today we will study Matthew Arnold's poem Sohrab and Rustam. I am going to divide this poem into sections. First section will be introductory part, and in second section I will explain this poem. This poem is included in BA Part 2nd by Maharaja Ganga Singh University, Bikaner. And first of all, introduction of the poet. As you know, poet of this poem means Matthew Arnold has written Sohrab and Rustam. Matthew Arnold was born on 24th December 1822, Laleham, Middlesex, England, and he died on 15th April 1888 at Liverpool. English Victorian poet and literary and social critic, noted especially for his classical attacks on the contemporary tastes and manners of the barbarians. He has given such names. He has given name to the aristocracy as barbarians, the Philistines, the commercial middle class. He has given the name Philistines to the commercial middle class and the populace. He became the apostle of culture in such works as Culture and Anarchy, and it was published in 1869. So his work Culture and Anarchy was published in 1869. The work that gives Arnold his high place in the history of literature and the history of ideas was all accomplished in the time he could spare from his official duties. His first volume of verse was The Strayed Traveller and Other Poems by A. It was his initial, means A. And The Strayed Traveller and Other Poems was published in 1849. This was followed in 1852 by another under the same initial, Empedocles on Etna and Other Poems. In 1853 appeared the first volume of poems published under his own name. It consisted partly of poems selected from the earlier volumes and also contained the well-known preface explaining, among other things, why Empedocles was excluded from the selection. It was a dramatic poem in which the suffering finds no vent in action. So he has given the reason why he excluded Empedocles on Etna from that volume, in which there is everything to be endured, nothing to be done. This preface foreshadows his later criticism in its insistence upon the classical virtues of unity, impersonality, universality, and architectonic power, and upon the value of the classical masterpieces as models for an age of spiritual discomfort, an age wanting in moral grandeur. So he has explained what is the classical poetry. Other editions followed, and Merope, Arnold's classical tragedy, appeared in 1858 and new poems in 1867. After that date, though there were further editions, Arnold wrote, not much of Arnold's verse will stand the test of his own criteria. He has given the criteria of the poetry, but not much of Arnold's verse will stand that test. Far from being classically poised, impersonal, serene, and grand, it is often intimate, personal, full of romantic regret, sentimental pessimism, and nostalgia. As a public and social character and as a prose writer, Arnold was sunny, debonair, means he was very confident person, and sanguine. Sanguine means he was also optimistic. But beneath ran the current of his varied life, and of this much of his poetry is the echo. Among the major Victorian writers, Matthew Arnold is unique in that his reputation rests equally upon his poetry and his poetry criticism. So he has written poetry and poetic criticism. Only a quarter of his productive life was given to writing poetry, but many of the same values attitudes and feelings that are expressed in his poems achieve a fuller or more balanced formulation in his prose. This unity was obscured for most earlier readers by the usual evaluations of his poetry as gnomic or thought laden. So his poetry is fully thought laden, full of thoughts, or as melancholy or elegiac, and of his prose as urbane, didactic, and often satirically witty in its self imposed task of enlightening the social consciousness of England. So he wanted to bring enlightening in social consciousness of England. Many readers have come to see Arnold as the most modern of the Victorians. Arnold himself defines the modern in his first lecture as professor of poetry at Oxford in 1857. He has given the definition of the modern. On the modern element in literature, this lecture marked Arnold's transition from poet to social and literary critic. He argued that the great need of a modern age is an intellectual deliverance, preoccupation with the arts of peace, the growth of a tolerant spirit, the capacity for refined pursuits, the formation of taste, and above all, the intellectual maturity. So there should be intellectual maturity to observe facts with a critical spirit and to judge by the rule of reason. So writing should be judged by the rule of reason. This prescription, which he found supremely fulfilled in Athens of the 5th century BC, is of course an idealized one when applied to any age. Arnold believed, however, that holding up this ideal was necessary if his own age was to become truly modern, truly humanized and civilized. Now, the introduction of the poem Sohrab and Rustam. And Sohrab and Rustam, as you know, is written by Matthew Arnold. So this is the introduction of the poem. Sohrab and Rustam, it is epical poem. Epic poem in blank verse by Matthew Arnold, published in 1853. So when Sohrab and Rustam was published, it was published in 1853. In his collection poems, among Arnold's sources for this heroic romance set in ancient Persia. So the poem is set in ancient Persia, were translations of an epic by the Persian poet Ferdowsi and Sir John Malcolm's History of Persia. And this writing was written in 1815. The poem is an account of Sohrab's search for his father. So Sohrab is searching for his father who disappeared years earlier. A warrior for the Tartars, Sohrab engages in battle with Persian forces, not realizing that Rustam, the Persian chieftain, is his father. Sohrab challenges the older man in single combat. Combat means fight of armies. Only when the young warrior lies mortally wounded from Rustam's spear does he talk of his birth. It is then that father and son realize their relationship. Grief-stricken, full of sadness, Rustam promises to give Sohrab's body a royal burial. So this is the introduction of the poem. And now summary of the poem. So summary of the Sohrab and Rustam. The two powerful armies of the Tartars and the Persians, there are two armies, Tartars and Persian armies, are encamped along the banks of the Oxus river. And they are camping on the banks of the Oxus river. It is night and the soldiers are asleep. But daylight will bring a great conflict between mighty forces, powerful forces. To one Tartar, rest refuses to come. In the greyness of the early dawn, he leaves his bed and makes his solitary way through the black tents of the great encampment to the quarters of Perenvisa. Who is Perenvisa? Commander of the Tartar army. He is Sohrab, the youthful champion of the Tartars. Hardly more than a boy, Sohrab is a boy, he develops into the mightiest fighter of the Tartar host. Young in years and famous in arms, he is nevertheless restless and discontented. Above everything else, he wants to find the father. He is searching for his father he has never seen. The incomparable Rustam, invincible, who can't be um, uh, means who can't be defeated. Invincible means chieftain of the Persians. Rustam does not know even Rustam does not even know that he has a son. He is told that a woman of Azerbaijan, after his departure from that place, bore him a child, but that was years earlier. Rustam gives the matter little thought because he believes the child to be a girl. After Sohrab is born, the fearful mother, hoping to prevent her son from being taken from her and raised for war, deceives Rustam with that report. Nevertheless, Sohrab becomes a warrior, and his mother's ruse avails nothing except to keep her son from a knowledge of his father. Perenveza awakens when Sohrab enters. So Sohrab has come to that camp in which Perenveza was resting and asks an unusual favor of him. Sohrab wishes to challenge a leader of the Persians to single combat. So he challenges um, to Persian leader for single combat, for single fighting. The duel to occur as soon as arrangements can be made. He hopes that his fame as a fighter will thereby reach the ears of his father. Perenveza urges patience and questions his wisdom in the tempting fate. But at last he unwillingly agrees to Sohrab's request. Thus challenged by their Tartar foe, the Persians are barely able to conceal their alarm. They have no champion to pit against the redoubtable young Sohrab except Rustam. And Rustam withdraws because of slights from the young Persian ruler. When the Persians appeal to him, cleverly implying that Rustam is hoarding his fame and becomes reluctant to risk combat with younger men, Rustam is aroused and grudgingly consents to meet the Tartar champion. He stipulates. So he energetically answers, however, that he will fight. Unknown to the enemy, he does not know that he is his son. So unknown to the enemy and in plain armor, for armor means weapon, for he fears that his great name might otherwise daunt the brave young challenger at the outset. Now that his temper is aroused, Rustam is in no mood to give up the chance of another single combat. Halfway between the waiting armies, Sohrab and Rustam come face to face for duel, for fighting. Before they fight, words pass between them and a strange disquiet settles over their spirits. The moment passes, however, and the conflict begins. Sohrab's misgivings return when his nimbleness gives him the initial advantage. He forbears to follow it up. Stung with anger and shame, Rustam gives him no second chance. With a shout of Rustam, he renews his attack upon Sohrab, who, thunderstruck at the name, momentarily lowers his shield. Instantly he is transfixed by Rustam's spear and falls to the ground, mortally wounded. As his life ebbs away, the young man reveals to his adversary the secret of his birth. Rustam, at first incredulous, it is unbelievable for Rustam, is convinced when Sohrab bares his arm to reveal the sign of Rustam's own seal, pricked there soon after his birth. The unhappy Rustam, beset by extremes of agony and remorse, can barely be restrained from taking his own life and dying with his son. Broken by grief, he promises to bear the body of Sohrab far away, so that it might be in death where it was never in life, near the palace of snow-headed Jal, the boy's grandfather. There it will receive burial worthy of a son of Rustam. Thus ends Sohrab's quest for his father. Life passes from him. The day wanes. Night comes on. The majestic river flows on into the frosty starlight, and campfires begin to twinkle through the fog. So the light is twinkling through the fog. of the campfire. Rustam grieving remains on the river's end alone with his son. So this is tragic story of Sohrab and Rustam. This is the summary of the poem. I think you understood it, and now I will explain this poem in my next session. Thanks for watching this video.